All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, November 26th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And Jake, this is episode 66. For those Star Wars fans out there, I know me and Jake are big nerds about it, so I just thought it was a fun episode. I figured I'd go ahead and break it out. What are you looking for?
I was looking for my Order 66 hat. I'll look at it when you're talking about a topic here in a minute.
Anyway, yeah, no, you can get all settled in. But yeah, it is our Order 66 episode, and Jake, we're going to give our final thoughts on the Texas-Kentucky game. It is officially Aggie week, and the Lonestar Showdown this weekend, Jake, on Saturday, a rivalry renewed after 13 years of being dormant. These two teams meet back up in College Station with College Game Day, with, I know, Josh Pate. He's got his game day showdown there in College Station. I think anybody who is anybody, I've actually been invited to a tailgate on that Saturday. I don't think I'm going to make it, unfortunately, but I definitely wish I could, just because we are going to a Stars game the following day. So gotta get everything situated to go up to Dallas to go see the Stars play on Sunday. But anyway, it's going to be a great, crazy weekend. We've got family coming in. It's Thanksgiving weekend. It's a short work week, but a busy week. But I feel like, Jake, leading up to Saturday, this might be the longest week we've had all season, just getting ready for this Texas A&M game.
Yeah, I mean, if I would have never guessed that this would be a bigger game than the OU game, because A&M is a secondary rival for Texas. That's just a matter of fact. OU is the primary rival, but OU's just typically always better than A&M. That is not the case this year. A&M is a much better football team than Oklahoma this year, and an SEC championship berth is at the line. We'll talk about whether or not the playoffs are on the line for Texas. Obviously, they're on the line for A&M. They essentially have to win the SEC title game to get into the playoffs, more than likely. And so there's a lot on the line for both teams, probably a little bit more for the Aggies. And you know that crowd. I mean, A&M cried and just threw their hands like toddlers whenever Texas got into the SEC. And so this was the bone that the SEC threw them for letting Texas in, was giving them the first home game, even though they had the last one. And it turns out to be a pretty big deal that they got home field advantage for this game, because as we have seen throughout the SEC schedule, home field advantage matters a lot. Yeah. Teams are struggling going to Florida. Teams, Texas closer than expected at Arkansas. Tennessee lost at Arkansas. You've seen how much home field advantage matters in some of these big time matchups. And
there was a big win in Norman this last weekend.
Yes, Norman taking down Alabama. I mean, home field advantage, especially in night games. Auburn took down A&M.
South Carolina took down A&M.
Yeah, South Carolina took down A&M. I mean, you look at A&M, they're on a 2-game SEC losing skid, but both of them are on tough road environments at night. And it does make a difference. I mean, if A&M, at least Auburn, South Carolina, I do think is probably a little bit better team. But if you look at Auburn, if that's played at A&M, do you think there's any way in hell Auburn wins that game?
I don't think Auburn. No, I don't think so either. I think they got on a roll early. First couple of scores, got all the momentum on their side. They were able to ride that wave essentially all the way through overtime, and it carried them to a victory.
Yeah, and so it matters. And so it's funny enough that kind of made fun of them for just getting that consolation prize, but it turns out to be a pretty big one, because it will matter in this game. And Texas is going to have to deal with that crowd, because it's going to be an absolute crazy scene on Saturday.
Well, let's go ahead and real quick thoughts on Kentucky. You and I talked about it before we went on. No one really cares about the Texas-Kentucky game anymore. Everyone is really excited to just jump right into the Texas A&M conversation and how these two teams match up and people's opinions on it and different ways you can look at it. Also, what happened over the weekend, we are going to touch on the major upsets. I mean, there were 4 major upsets that happened this weekend that are going to crucially determine and alter what the college football playoff standings are going to look like, not only this upcoming week, but really for the final playoff predictions or for the final playoff poll as well. these games that happened this last weekend is huge, really for Texas as well. We're going to have that conversation probably towards the end of the episode. So Jake, let's go ahead, jump in real quickly. Final thoughts about the Texas-Kentucky game before we move forward.
I would feel really good coming out of that game if Quinn didn't kind of mess up his ankle a little bit. I mean, that's my biggest takeaway is how healthy is Quinn going to be Saturday out of this? We know that it is not anything major, but is he going to play with confidence? He only threw 5 passes in that second half. When I was going through the box score, kind of digging through the drive charts, rewatching the game, it confirmed my original thoughts, which was the second half offense. It was just run the ball, which I loved. And it would have worked even better if, people could just not fumble the football. Right. But that's really what I came away with was this game should have been 49-14 or 7 really as a final score. If you just don't fumble the football, it ended up actually looking closer than the game really was. I thought Texas just absolutely dominated the football game. I think it was Kentucky only had 1 drive over 39 yards in the whole game.
Yeah. I did have a stat of what between the touchdown drive and then what the rest of their drives look like was night and day difference. And I think they almost totaled on all their other yards combined with the 1 touchdown drive that they ended up having. So, Jake, 2 weeks in a row, we're closing a game on heavy run drives. Coach Sark had something to say about culture drives. He coined the term culture drives. And I think that's something that is different within this Texas team. There's the hat right there. For those listening on a podcast, he's got his Order 66 hat. We coined this episode 66. Again, big culture drives, big running drives to close the fourth quarter out. Those drives remind me very, very much of a Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, TJ Yeldon, Nick Saban-led Alabama team in the SEC championship game to just close out a second half when they've got a 2-touchdown lead. That's what those drives reminded me of. And for Coach Sark to say those are culture drives, that's kind of pointing to where this program is currently.
Also, to do that with the 5-star Oklahoma offensive lineman recruit in the stands who chose to go to a Texas game over OU Alabama, and get to be in the stands as an offensive lineman. If you're on a recruiting visit and you watch a team run it 15 times, take off half the quarter and score a touchdown, and you're not going to commit there, you're pretty much, I don't think there's anything they could do to make you commit at that point. And we'll see if he's going to flip or not. The rumor basically is just who knows right now from what I've read. But that drive for me was my favorite drive of the year.
Absolutely.
To just run every single play against a pretty good defense. Say what you want about Kentucky. They do have a good defense at the end of the day. And Texas's offense was dominant when they weren't shooting themselves in the foot.
And Jake, speaking on the fumbles that you mentioned earlier, Jaden Blue is carrying around a football everywhere he goes. Even in interviews, he had a football in his hands while speaking to media members. I've got two thoughts on this, and I tweeted about it earlier. One, great accountability. I love that you are taking steps into fixing whatever problem that you have holding onto the football. He's aware of it. He's taking accountability, and he's taking those steps. Also, on the flip side of that, I'll play devil's advocate to my own argument, is that I feel like fumbles, we've seen it with guys like Adrian Peterson in the NFL. We've seen it becomes a mental thing. It's almost like Shaq shooting a free throw. It becomes a mental block at some point in time. And if you put too much emphasis on it, it almost seems like it's going to have a negative effect, and you can psych yourself out with the fumble situation. Is it just too much for Jaden Blue to put too much emphasis on protecting the ball?
I'm going to say no, and this is the reason why. To devil's advocate, your devil's advocate.
No, double devil's advocate.
Double devil's advocate. He had mentioned if he was just saying he was carrying it around because he needs to carry around a football, but he was talking about how I've carried it when I've fumbled. It's because I've carried it too low, and I've carried it with my left arm is when the majority of his fumbles have happened. And when he was in that media member, he had it in his left hand and he had the ball up high and tight. And to me, that is something that can be fixed. If he's noticing it is and coach choice is recognizing it is a technical thing that is causing these fumbles, which when you're fumbling in that quantity, that definitely has to play into it. And yes, there's a mental side to it too. I think Jaden Blue's pretty tough mentally. He's a tough runner. I just find it hard to believe that he's mentally weak with this. And we'll find out, if it makes a difference because if he fumbles on Saturday, that's going to be detrimental for Texas in that type of environment. But, with him just holding that ball high and tight in your left, I feel like that's a muscle memory thing. You can kind of train yourself to remember and transfer into a game. And so I think that will hopefully carry over because if he's recognizing the reason why, that's what you got to do to take steps to correct it. You got to be a little over the top with it.
Yeah. Jake, also another final thought that Sark mentioned in his press conference on Monday, 7 turnovers have been caused in the last 2 games, 5 resulting in touchdown scoring drives, which is great. The other 2 drives that didn't end in touchdowns were knee outs to end either the half or the game. And so that's a pretty good percentage. But playing complementary football when your defense gives your offense an extra opportunity to score, the offense in the last couple of games are making it count.
Yeah, and that goes to the play calling as well. Sark, I think, used to have a tendency to just immediately draw up a trick play or go deep the first play after a turnover. He did that a lot against Georgia. I thought he tried to get it all back at times as a play caller. Felt like he's kind of adapted that. I think he realizes what this offense's strengths are and what they are not. And I feel like his play calling is kind of adapted around that. Every now, there's always going to be play calls you can nitpick with every single coach who's ever called plays. No one does it perfectly. But I do think his play calling has been a lot better since the Georgia game and been more to what we expect from Sarkisian. Because I did think the Georgia game was probably one of his lesser games, but when you have every level of the offense breaking down, that doesn't help as well. Right. And then the offense, I think there's just been an emphasis on execution, making sure that you're playing complementary football. It cost them against Georgia. The points off of turnovers stat in that game was a large disparity between the two teams, and you feel like that's been a point of emphasis since that game.
And Jake, lastly, on the Kentucky game, 12 sacks in the last 2 games. By 5 different players. So it's not just happening from Colin Simmons. It's not just happening from Anthony Hill. You get guys like Trey Moore, Byron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, who had a pretty decent, game coming back from injury against Kentucky. Even, some of your interior guys like a Vernon Broughton or an Alfred Collins are getting pressure on guys, getting pressure from your linebackers like a Leona Lafau. Jake, how important of it is you're not only playing complementary football, offense to defense, but on the same side of the football, your defensive line is complementing the linebackers taking advantage of when the defensive line is holding their blocks and taking up space on the offensive line, allowing them to shoot their gap. To me, really, I think the line of scrimmage, whether that be offensive or defensive line, Jake, played their best game against Kentucky.
Yeah, I would still say the Arkansas game, because I think Arkansas is just a better offense and they're better up front. Also, what I've been impressed with in these games is when they've played running quarterbacks, the ability to still get a pass rush but not lose contain. That has probably been one of the most impressive things to me, because it's one thing to disrupt a pocket passer and sack a pocket passer, but they've been able to still generate pressure while keeping contained against quarterbacks who have that mobility. And that's going to be really important Saturday against Marcel Reed. But then also, just when you get teams, it's so important for this defense to keep the other team behind the chains, because when it's 3rd and 7+ and it's a passing situation, you put in that NASCAR package, there's not very many offensive lines, if any, that are going to stop that from getting a sack at least once or twice in a game. And you've seen that when it's 3rd and long, the offense just looks like they're in hell against this Longhorn defense. And that's going to need to continue.
And Jake, team chemistry has been a really big thing, at least in the eyes of the coaching staff, but I think the media is starting to pay attention to it. I've noticed it for a while, but the fact that you've got guys like, a Michael Taff and an Andrew Mukuba wearing Jade for Thorpe t-shirts, and then you got Jade wearing a Quinn Ewers t-shirt during warmups, and just the team support of, Sark in his press conference mentioned, he says, we've always put we before me. Well, sometimes they're putting he before me, and they're putting their teammates ahead of themselves. And it's just super cool to see the support for Jade Barron and for guys like Quinn Ewers to get support from their own teammates, and hoping that, really, I think Sark broke it down. He said there's probably not a nationally recognized award where we don't have a guy as a semifinalist or a finalist to win it.
Yeah, or got snubbed to be a finalist, which I'm going to get into.
There's
here
a little bit of a teaser there.
But it just shows the level of recruiting from Sarkisian and the level of development. Even looking at Anthony Hill, who's such a talented prospect, his development from last year to this year is very noticeable. Wisner's development from last year to this year. Quinn Ewers' development, even though we've talked about his shortcomings, he is still a much better quarterback than when he started at Texas. You've just seen it at every position group, and I could go on and on. The development that this staff has done, and it's still, for me, just so refreshing to see, because we're not that far removed from a decade of just awful football and awful development. To see the development levels that have happened at every position group. And even you'll see a guy come in from the transfer portal. Look at a Jermaine Lowell. Watch the football he was playing at the start of the year. Watch the level of football he's playing now. He's a much better defensive tackle now. It's not just guys that are staying in the program. Guys who come in from the transfer portal get much better from game 1 to game 10.
Trey Moore.
Yeah. To be fair, he was playing good football to start the year, but he has become a different level of disruptive.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying he was bad or his play was lacking by any means through the first 4 or 5 game stretch or anything. I was probably, along with other Texas fans, probably had higher expectations than what he could deliver on it, going from a UTSA program to a University of Texas program. But man, talk about a player who has come on strong over the last 4 weeks or so. We talked about him possibly wanting to, maybe the possibility of him coming back next year because his draft stock may have fell a little bit. I'm not so sure that's the case after the last 4 games.
Would you say that if you take the last 4 or 5 games, he's played above expectations you had coming in? Not for the whole season, but for the last stretch.
Yes, I would say that I did not realize his ability in terms of playing screen, in terms of playing the run. I thought he was a strict pass rusher, which he's shown that in the last 4 or 5 weeks. But his ability, his play recognition on the edge to rush the passer, recognize it to screen, back off, and play coverage is the best I've seen from a Texas edge player in a very, very long time. Maybe Brian Arakpo.
Yeah, and what really impressed me, I watched him a lot when I was at the Arkansas game, was the amount of moves he has.
Mm-hmm.
He's versatile as a pass rusher. He's got a speed rush. He's got a spin move. He's got a swim. He's got a power rush to him. We saw that in Kentucky.
Yeah.
He used and abused an offensive lineman to get a sack.
He basically used the offensive lineman as the sack. He
made the lineman sack the quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a big boy that he did that to. This isn't some small Big 12 linemen. These are big guys. He has been a huge difference maker. And if I was Texas, man, I would be offering him a bag to stay next year, to make this, because we talk about this year's defense, and we'll get into this after the season's over. Next year's defense might even be nastier.
Yeah, Jake, let's go ahead and move it to our next segment. I wanted the award talk to kind of transition well into your segment, which we all love. Jake, go jump.
Yeah. People probably know where this is going. Anthony Hill is not a finalist for the Buckus, and I need to pull up some stats I have saved, but this is probably the biggest snub that I've seen out of all these awards, because you look, and I'm going to pick an OU player because why not? It's an Oklahoma player. What is Stuntsman doing in this over Anthony Hill? I think he has like 100 total tackles and Anthony Hill's 79. There's solo tackles, and I don't even have to have the stat pulled up because I memorized this one, but Anthony Hill has 38 solo tackles. Stuntsman has 41. So they're pretty close in that, right? Tackles for loss, Anthony Hill 15, Stuntsman 7.5. sacks, 7.5 for Anthony Hill, 1 for Stuntsman, forced fumbles, 4 for Anthony Hill, goose egg for Stuntsman, interceptions, 1 for Anthony Hill, goose egg for Stuntsman, missed tackles, 8 for Anthony Hill, 12 for Stuntsman. Every explosive play category, he has dominated him in. And really, if you look at it, it looks like the award should probably go to the Pitt linebacker, who's also a sophomore, by the way, because his stats are right there with Anthony Hill while having more tackles. But if you look at everyone else, they're not even really close in tackles for loss.
And I'll say this about Jalen Walker being a finalist. He did miss, 3 or 4 games due to injury.
Walker's not a final.
I thought I saw him as a finalist.
It is. Oh, it is. You're correct.
Yeah.
But still, I get it if you're not on the field the whole game.
Right.
I have more of a problem with the
Clemson linebacker and the Oklahoma
and then
linebacker.
Stuntsman, because Stuntsman last year, Stuntsman hasn't been as good this year as he was last year. Also, Stuntsman's too damn afraid to even try to go for a fumble recovery in the end zone and gets out hustled by a running back who's 20 yards away from the fumble in the biggest rivalry game of the season. I mean, I haven't forgot about that. Stuntsman just not even trying to go for a fumble recovery against Texas.
Yeah.
I just think it's ridiculous. I hope it lights a fire under Anthony Hill's ass and he plays with a little extra fire this Saturday against a team which he was committed to begin with, by the way.
He was, yeah, and I'm sure he's very much looking forward to not only proving himself on the field after being snubbed of the prestigious Best Linebacker in the Country award, but now he gets to show it off against a team he was formerly committed to in Texas A&M before Sark and company was able to flip him. Well, Jake, let's go ahead, jump into the Sark press conference just a little bit, and then we can kind of finish this thing off with the playoff picture talk with the losses around the country. Sark did kind of start off with the addressing the Jaden Blue situation with fumbling and really the offense fumbling as a whole. But holding on to the football is a must to have success at A&M. Can't turn the ball over. But then he kind of went through some things to watch as this team prepares for A&M and what A&M does well. First thing he mentioned was their pass rush with that defensive front. And they are good, and those defensive linemen are essentially leading tacklers for that A&M defense. A&M controlling the ball on offense using their running game. Now they are going to be down Le'Veon Moss, their leading rusher on the season. He's out for the year, but that backup is a load to bring down, and a 1-2 punch with him and Marcel Reed. It is crucial for Texas to get them off the field. And then red zone efficiency. They are one of the best teams in the country offensively and finishing their drives inside the red zone and ending it in a touchdown.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I did not hear what you said at the end there. I was looking at something on the.
Oh, that's fine. I would just say the red zone offense for A&M is one of the best in the country.
Red zone offense is a pretty simple formula, right? When Texas has struggled in the red zone, they haven't run the ball well. When any team struggles in the red zone, they typically aren't running the ball well. A&M runs the ball pretty well. The stats, which we'll dive into later this week, they aren't as mind-boggling as you would think. But when you look at when A&M is successful on offense, it is coming through the ground game. You look at that LSU game. They took over the second half with their ground game. It comes from the quarterback. It comes from the running backs, which they are obviously missing their starter who got injured, I think, in the South Carolina game for the season. Yep. And that definitely affected them in that Auburn game, by the way. You could just see the drop-off at running back as compared to when they had, I think it was Moss.
Le'Veon Moss is their leading rusher, but he's out for the year. And now I'll say this much: Daniels is a big boy, and he's a load to take down.
Yeah, and they have Emmitt Smith's son,
as
well,
yeah,
who will get plenty of snaps as well. But neither, I would say, are to the level of Moss, and that has hurt this offense. Obviously, tackling is going to be really important. It kind of reminds me of the Florida running backs where they can make things happen after contact. And that's why gang tackling and just good form tackling, which we've seen the majority of the season from the Texas defense, they've maybe had one game or two games where the tackling wasn't just almost perfect. And they just need to play to their identity as a defense that they've shown this whole season.
Yeah, and Jake, he did mention, I know everybody here probably wants an update on Quinn, if you have not already heard. But Texas has shifted their practice schedule with it being an off week of school. They're out of school for Thanksgiving break, so all the players on campus allowed to sleep in a little bit. He said we're not going to have early morning workouts, basically pushing the entire football schedule just back a few hours and letting the guys kind of get some rest and sleep in, the coaching staff. And he said really the whole team felt kind of rejuvenated when they met in the mid-morning time before his presser. And then they hadn't even gone out to practice yet. He did say that Quinn expected to practice, fully participate in practice. He thinks he's doing okay, but he hadn't really seen him play before the press conference because they moved the practice back. So they didn't really know how he felt on his ankle or even after he had a full practice and how that ankle felt afterwards. We'll probably get more news about that as the week goes on, though.
Yeah, and that practice shakeup, that's actually a pretty nice thing, by the way, to just get something different, to get to sleep in a little bit. They are 18 to 22-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Having that little bit of shakeup, that probably does rejuvenate everyone. And that helps going into this game, especially. You're not going to have to do much to get these guys hyped for this game. It's a rivalry game. It's for a trip to the SEC championship. I never would have imagined this game would have been that, for meaning both teams having a chance. Yeah. I would have thought it would have only been Texas, but it has turned out this way. And so just having little things like that, I feel like all those little things are going to add up and help this team be prepared for Saturday.
No, I completely agree. And lastly, on his presser, the only thing I really wanted to pick out was a reporter asked him, do you think that A&M playing a lack of big games throughout recent history is going to affect this game and Texas being more prepared in terms of, playing in a playoff game or playing in a conference title game recently, and that this team is more experienced? And Sark said they play in the SEC. They've had plenty of big games, and they've had big games against Alabama. Now, have they had any win and advance to the SEC games? No, they haven't. Have they had any of those against their most heated rival at home at night? No, they haven't. But I assume that the atmosphere and the stadium is going to be rocking, and Sark has probably more to worry about his own team being ready to go into that environment than A&M being prepared for this one.
Yeah, I mean, if this game was at Texas, but that question, I don't know. I mean, I make fun of A&M, but that's just kind of a silly question to me. A&M's been on game day a ton. They don't have a very good record on game day, but they've had
they've had big games.
They have had big games where the national spotlight is on them as a program plenty of times while they've been in the SEC. I kind of thought that question was trying to get Sark to bite, to give a little bit of a sound clip for A&M. And as Sark always does, he had a good answer ready to go, because I thought that question was kind of bogus.
Yeah, which, by the way, I need to mention something to speaking of rat poison and sound bites. I believe I sent it to you if I can, but it was an offensive lineman for Texas A&M, and he basically came out and said, who was it? Was he talking about Anthony Hill?
Anthony Hill, yeah. Interesting guy to pick on.
It's funny because it didn't work out for Oklahoma when they decided to point out Anthony Hill in the media. And now Texas A&M offensive lineman is doing the same thing, saying he's good, but it's nothing we can't handle.
Yeah, it's just interesting to say that about a player like that. I don't think Anthony Hill needs any extra motivation for this week. It kind of reminds me of the Iowa State linemen last year calling out Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, and we were both like, "What are you doing? Why would you bark up that tree of all of them?" And I bet Anthony Hill will hear that one in the locker room soon. If not from another player, I bet a coach will bring it up to him.
Trey Zune III says he feels bad for the Longhorns due to how crazy the atmosphere will be at College Station this week. A message to you, sir, that Texas has gone into Alabama and beaten Alabama at Alabama. Texas has played in the Cotton Bowl and won that game multiple times. Texas has played in big environments. This is kind of why players commit to Texas, to play in these games, to go to these environments and shut down the home crowd with big plays and big games. And that is why you commit to the University of Texas, because you're not afraid or you don't feel bad whenever you go into a game like this. You're ready to play and you're ready to prove the haters wrong. And I think just providing fuel to the fire of what is already set in Texas's belly is not a great strategy to go into this one.
No, I'm sure some of the A&M coaches were probably like, really, dude, why? Don't give them any type of press clippings to put up there.
We're focused on Georgia. I mean, Texas.
And one other little side note about this game, just real quick. I think it kind of runs along with all this. This is the most expensive ticket in the history of any regular season game at the NFL or college level.
Wow.
The get-in price for top of the nosebleeds is around $750 pre-fees. The average ticket price is well over $1,200. It is quite literally a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it is. It is for one side of the ball, I would say. Now, Jake, speaking on that, because this is a must-win for Texas A&M. It truly is. I mean, they have to win this game, get into the SEC championship, win that game over Georgia to probably get into the playoffs. They're either sitting at a top 4 seed in the college football playoffs with a bye, or they're probably on the outside looking in. Now, with the losses around the country, you had Ole Miss losing to Florida. You had Bama losing to Oklahoma. You had A&M losing to Auburn. Colorado and BYU also losing in the Big 12. All of those teams ranked. All of those teams, aside from A&M and Colorado, looking at a playoff spot. What happens now? What does this playoff picture look like? And the big question is, and I think a lot of Texas fans thinking, say Texas does happen to drop this game against A&M, do they still have a spot in the top 12?
Assuming they don't get just blown out and embarrassed, yes, I think they're in. A lot of people aren't going to like that, but they're not going to not put in a 2-loss Texas team. They're not going to drop them from number 3 to out of the playoffs unless it is a just embarrassing performance, which at that point I probably wouldn't want them to get in, quite frankly. But if it's a game where they lose by 3 on the road at A&M, yeah, they're going to get in. Not how any of us want them to get in, to be very clear. But
do you think that they'd have a home game?
That I will have to dive more into to know. Because
I think that would really.
What seeds get a home game? 5 through 8?
Yes, because the 8 plays the 9.
That it would honestly depend if anyone else goes down. Yeah. I would put in Indiana ahead. I mean, if you got 1 loss, I'd probably put you ahead. And so probably not. Just what I would say off the top of my head right now. I would need to dive more into it to have a full opinion.
You're essentially, I think we're kind of agreeing on this. Texas probably falling in that 9, 10, I think at absolute worst 11 spot.
Yeah, I would probably say 9 or 10 is where I would think they would fall, assuming it was a close loss.
And say, an SMU knocks off of Miami or something like that in the ACC championship game. Maybe then you're looking at Texas getting at an 8-7 spot. Maybe Notre Dame falls to USC. That's, I think, actually a kind of a possibility. I know Notre Dame's playing really well. I know USC not playing well at all, but it's a game that both those two programs look forward to. They've got a lot of history. But say something crazy happens in a year where a lot of crazy has happened. You can't say it's unlikely. Texas, I think, then elevates and possibly gets in as a home team in the playoffs, provided a loss in this game to A&M. But again, I don't think – now here's another scenario, Jake. Say Texas goes on to play Georgia, loses to Georgia. I don't think that their seed drops very much. In fact, I think they're a 5 or 6 seed.
Yeah, we can argue about this later, or not even argue. We can discuss it when we kind of react to the college football playoff poll. But it might – the perfect scenario other than getting a bye is obviously just you got to beat A&M, because then if you lose the SEC title game, ending as a 5 or a 6 seed is damn near almost better than ending up like a 3 seed.
I would agree with that.
It depending how it all shakes out.
Right.
I mean, the committee I mean, if you're a playoff committee member, by the way, after Saturday, you got to be like, really? You guys trying to make this as difficult as humanly possible on us?
Because now you're looking at Indiana still staying in as maybe an 11 seed. You're even looking at an SMU having a spot in the top, 12 teams. You're having Boise State, who might be a 4 seed and might actually have a first round bye projected. So a lot that happened with Ole Miss. Lastly, on the topic of Ole Miss and Alabama losing last week, I'm going to throw Tennessee in here as well. Who did Tennessee lose to, Jake?
Arkansas and Georgia.
Okay, so the Georgia game omitted. That's an even playing field between Tennessee and Texas. Both lost to Georgia. Did Texas beat Arkansas?
Yeah, but but Tennessee lost to them on the road. Oh,
wait. Texas also beat them on the road. That's right. Okay, so Ole Miss. That surely their schedule provided them an opportunity to beat teams like a Florida or a Kentucky.
Oh, no, actually, they lost to Florida and Kentucky.
Wait a second.
One of them at home.
And then Texas, they beat Kentucky, and then they also beat Florida, correct?
No, they didn't beat them. They beat the tar out of them. Yeah, they beat the living crap out of both those teams.
Yeah, okay. And then lastly, Alabama, the Crimson Tide, also complaining how weak Texas' SEC gauntlet of a grind schedule is. They had Vanderbilt. Oh man, talk about just a hard place to play in is at Vanderbilt. And then Oklahoma, just the juggernaut of an offense that is Oklahoma, who can just put up points on you like it's nothing. Surely Texas lost to one of those two teams that they played also on their schedule, correct?
Let me check my what? No, it appears Texas beat both of those teams. In fact, beating Oklahoma damn near by the same score they beat Alabama.
It almost feels like the Texas grind of the SEC schedule that they weren't going to be able to handle. Other SEC teams cannot handle the SEC schedule, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it is funny to me. It's just ironic because Texas is such a weak. Well, if Ole Miss played the same schedule, they would still have two of their losses.
Yeah,
two of their three losses.
Yeah.
If Tennessee played the same schedule, they would still have the same 2 losses. I mean, you can go across the board, and it just goes to say that this year in college football, it has all been about just winning and winning and being consistent. And Texas, while you can sit there and say they haven't been perfectly consistent, one thing that's been consistent is winning. And that is what they have done all year long, minus a Georgia game where they had a horrible first half, which for some reason has diluted people's mind, which again, I've complained about this a lot, but it's diluted people's mind into saying that game was a blowout. It was a 1-possession game going into the fourth quarter, people.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, Jake. We have some big news. We are going to have some scheduled interviews in the future. We're going to talk about what that looks like going into the Texas A&M game. Very excited to have that. We will announce that once everything is finalized, but things are looking up. We are going to have a reaction episode to the college football playoff poll projection for tomorrow night, later tonight on Tuesday night. We will have a Wednesday episode reacting to that. It will drop at noon, typical time, and then the rest of our schedule will remain the same. But we're really looking forward to a happy Thanksgiving weekend. Spend some time with your families, get a lot of things done around the house, and guess what? Just enjoy some football. It's the last regular season college football week that we get. A lot of teams' seasons are ending this week. A lot of teams looking to go bowling this weekend. So should be a great slate of games. Jake, we're going to wrap things up here. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. And as always, welcome.
All In Sports Network. We love sports.